Thank you, Vishnu. I think we had a nice discussion also towards the end. Thank you for that. Thank you for everyone contributing to it. I thought I will just conclude what Rashmi was talking to you about the design considerations, so we can see, go through all the points that she covered, and we can look at a SaaS application and see where all these fit. I just, I want. We covered lots of aspects over here. What was the first thing that she covered when she introduced the design concepts?
Work is network.
It's not working now?
Now it's working.
Now is it working?
Oh.
Yeah, now it's working. You have to be keeping it close.
I have to
Just put it
Okay.
over.
see, it's not working. Now?
Speaker is coming. Speaker is I.
Yeah, yeah.
You can
Oh.
It's fine.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Did it come? Correct. Your visual appeal and your user experience and call it accessibility, where we primarily spoke about the target audience whom you want to look at your content, what you want to market, where you want to keep your users, and how you enable sign up so they remain with you. So she spoke about different verifications that is there by earlier sign up and do it. If you look at MailChimp, you can see unless you verify yourself, they won't allow you to get in. They're just making it secure for you to force spammers to reach to you. You have delayed verifications like in Typeforms, because the solution is that way. You can build your service and understand what they are, and then go and sign up with them and be a consumer of that part. So this is how SaaS applications come up with different accessibility options, and they will also enable you across devices. Internet, of course, it should be there, and they will also allow, when you design it, you have to also make it resolution ready. It is available across all your devices that you're using. And then the next part, what we introduced was onboarding. After we spoke about onboarding, Rashmi took you through 3 different concepts and introduced multi-tenancy. So we, after onboarding, we looked at your identity management and authentication. She spoke about using an existing identity provider, how you can go into your SaaS application. So typically, when you logged into Cheese, you would have used your LinkedIn as your logout service and renting. And then we spoke about data segregation. Right. Here we mainly dealt with as an organization, when you come into a SaaS application, how is your data separated from another organization? So your data doesn't, your security is ensured over here. And she covered both of them under the concept of multi-tenancy, and she explained how through onboarding till here, you can actually achieve that. So when we actually go into the past story in the coming masterclass, we will go into detail about each of them. What we wanted to actually do here is keep in the context of the SaaS application and design of SaaS application. Then we introduced, then came the operational performance, where we touched upon scalability and accessibility. Right? And just with operational performance, and we touched about scalability and accessibility. So typical scenario, what you can think of is when you have your Diwali bonanza, how Amazon will really scale up when those many requirements come. This is one use case that you can really think about. This is also really what your provider gives you, and we will cover it in the coming sessions. Then finally we talk about extensibility and adaptability, where the concept of open APIs and different integrations come in. So take you through a simple demo, and close this session. We looked at many tools and we thought very well we can bring you in was to show you your Office 365. This have different applications that you use. I have the presentation. So I want to take you here. You can see what you get in Office 365. You get a different set of applications which you use. If you're very used to Windows user, you know this, what you use. You have Microsoft Teams, you have OneNote, you have your Outlook, and this is enabled by your Exchange server, which takes care of your mail communications and your contact information. You have your link server linked to it, and also more important, your SharePoint server linked to it. That is where OneDrive comes into place and you use it. So it actually gives you one experience across, and Microsoft is providing Office 365 as a SaaS application, and your accessibility is very well managed over here. So when I have not logged in and I come to Microsoft page, this is what I see. See, they have used a global navigation over here to explain what they are, for you to easily access it. They have a very descriptive menu to look at it. So these were all the aspects when you really consider an user experience they have kept in, and they actually giving you a trial of it, and they mention their products and what can be used. This is how it is. Right. Now, this is when I get in and I have not logged in. This is kind of attracting me into using this application. Now, when I sign in, see how my onboarding happens and what happens behind the scene. I can sign in using my organization ID, so I can clearly link to my colleagues within the organization, and also work along with them using a Microsoft Teams. So I just logged in with my SAP ID. It is a two-factor authentication. It is again asking for a client certificate from me after it understood which organization that I belong. This is my SaaS application. This is how I use it. You can see it is customized to reflect, to show which organization I belong. I have a global navigation over here. I have all my apps that I use here, and also the different apps that I've been recently working on and things like that. So I can look at all these apps and start working on it, and say how provisioning happened is, some of them will be like available for me to use because my company would have registered to. But something like a VCO, it could be a licensed access only my user will have. But what it actually did is, it brought in both. What my colleagues are also seeing and what is specifically licensed for me. So this is actually bringing in, looking at my subscription, it is bringing in the data that I want and the apps that I want to access. Now, when the next part we mainly talk about was open APIs. To really show open API, say I want to extend this application, I want to get a report of my organization. I have so many data there in my OneDrive. I want to create an application. I want to generate a monthly report on how my development metrics are in my current scenario. In that sense, I have stored all these things in my Access DB or my Excel, and I am just creating an application out of it. What Microsoft actually have extended all the APIs. So if you actually go to a Graph Explorer, it is directly logging me in because through a single sign-on into the Graph Explorer. What you see actually here is the login. Is the open APIs available to access what I have given the permission for it to access. So if I sign in with Microsoft, it is again taking in my ID. This is how seamless it is once you implement and access a SaaS application. Right. You can see modify permissions where I have given permissions only to take my profile information from Outlook. So I can actually show you, and we have different things, and here I have only given my permission only to get the my profile information. So I can actually query it and see. This is a simple API that you have. I run my query, it actually ran automatically. You can actually see my data over here, what is my given name. Similarly, you can get my manager information. Through this, I can again extend it and create applications on top of it. This is what we spoke about extensively. Right. So we are open to take questions. We are open to network. We can take a break. Then after that, Paramita will come and spoke about
So we have
execution.
hopefully another 45 minutes of session, an hour of session maybe. We would like to take a break now, and in the break we can discuss, but more about tea, coffee. It is there on the second floor or on the first floor. Considering this ground, you have to go up the stairs, and there is a coffee. Hello, record. Nice one. Welcome everyone. Welcome back. This break was required. Hope you guys had, whatever we talked about, you at least have understood a fair level of it. We didn't purposefully go too deep or too deep into any of it because it's too difficult to manage also in such a short while. So the only recommendation that we have anyway is that you have to go back and spend some time in detail. Now, before I really go into this, there's been a request from at least the mentors and the cloud computing team that they see their mentees in the system, but looks like mentees need to do this effort of onboarding into the system, and that is only when they will start really working with it. So I'm assuming I have some of you already onboarded into this Move My Cheese system. You have. Do you see your mentor's name? Okay. So at the end, I will introduce the mentors who are at least in the room, and I will also give you some other names. If you can recognize.
I had scheduled some 2 to 3 sessions, but all are getting missed, and still nothing is scheduled from my
So
end.
something is wrong with the whole overall system on how things are happening.
Yeah, it's getting
We need to
slow
find
because they are
out.
also figuring it out if we find any
They are
issues.
saying that either the mentees are not onboarded or the mentors are not onboarded. So in case there is a mentor, the mentee is not onboarded. So now you can't do anything until they are onboard. You can't even link to them. There's no email ID. There's no way to
A lot
really
of us
reach out.
still don't even have a mentor
Yeah.
assigned.
Yes.
That is also funny because at least the mentors here all have mentees
Yeah.
assigned, right? At least one. Many have three. But
all
always
have
one is assigned. Huh?
But we can't do
Three
anything.
mentees. That's what I'm saying. Most of them have three.
We don't have
But
a
nobody
mentor
has
assigned.
been. So anyway, let's talk about this problem to Archana at the end of it. But I wanted to introduce it and not miss it because once we go for lunch again, we might forget this. So now I will actually take a little step back, and we will not talk only purely about SaaS application, but actually execution in cloud. Maybe many of you are already doing this. Many of you might have heard about it, or might have questions also about it. So again, I will not go too deep into anything, but I will introduce a lot of things to you, a lot of jargons, a lot of new words maybe will get introduced. The idea is that yes, you go back and maybe look, because of Google search, we should be able to find out a lot of information. So we didn't want to be prescriptive also, so that's the reason why we are very generic, giving more information, and some things we have introduced, but you need to find every company in. So execution in cloud, or rather, there was a specific time where few years ago, you can say, when this whole cloud concept started becoming bigger, there was a need, or there was this concept of agile methodology coming in. That means you build in cloud or not, this was coming in also when people were already in the on-premise world. So, but it was more focused to a specific direction. people were already talking about building in smaller units, reducing, reducing waste, trying to make sure that you have everything that you have built is something that is complete, already tested. You already know that this is a small piece that you want. So make everything modular. The whole concept of modular object-oriented anyway came many years ago, but now we are saying that okay, deliverables also need to become modular. Why? Because we want to go early, fail early, and learn early, and then do it again and again. And this is the whole concept that we will talk about now. So there are multiple things which will overlap, and from an experience point of view, it's not that. So I've handled one team, one Scrum team, which was totally new. We learned how to do things in cloud. We actually learned in that was a team which was doing maybe .NET development before, and then they learned how to really ramp up and cloud. What do we do? How is the execution model and stuff? So we had to learn everything on the go. And in SAP, of course, we had this training of agile software engineering, which was made available at that point in time, which was trying to make sure that all people who are doing development tasks, QA job, or all kinds of jobs are actually learning this concept, because this is where we are heading towards. So if you are doing development cloud, you need to really become agile. You need to really become DevOps oriented, right? And that is, and that's how we learn, and that's where my exposure to it is most. Yeah. Now, when you would look at all, so a lot of people will say agile, a lot of people will say DevOps, then somebody will say Scrum, then somebody will say CI, then they will say CD, CI/CD, and a lot of words will come. Then DevOps. So you always get confused that what is this, right? And or how do they all come together? So I found this description, or this description of differentiating the end user, or rather the either consumer or the end user, based on which you can differentiate where you would like to look at agile principles, where you would like to look at DevOps as principles. So normally in the overall execution process, the stakeholders are on one side the customer, or where you are looking at the software requirements, on the other side, and this from the developer's perspective. Now this developer guy could be also a tester, it doesn't have to be, and the things are different in the cloud world. And that's the reason why it's called developer and tester. And on the other side, it is the team, or it is the operations and infrastructure of what is getting delivered. So finally, some unit will come which has to be sent to the customer, and the customer to start using it. In on-premise world, what was there? I'm not saying that on-premise world you didn't need something like this. This was also there. But normally this would be all the packaging and everything happens. You have some developable unit. You finally upload it somewhere, and from there the customer will either download, or you may actually, in olden days, we used to ship DVDs and all, and then the software will really work. The same remains, but there is much more need for everybody to come together. It is no longer you do your operations tasks, I do my development tasks, I don't know what you do, and you don't know what I do, and you have no need for you have no need to really understand the whole thing, which is something where the gaps are actually coming closer. Yeah. And that's the reason why. So these are the two, these are the people who are involved in the overall process. And agile is where normally, or the gap where, or the communication gap to be reduced by addressing or using agile methodologies to where you normally have an end user. It could be either really typically maybe a product owner, product manager, or an end customer who's giving you the functional requirements, and then the developer who's actually developing it. The other scenario where DevOps becomes more important is where where you really need to push this code that you have written, finally make sure that this gets built, and then becomes a deployable unit and goes into your goes to the customer. Okay? And this is where the differentiation comes, and I want to explain both. That's the reason why I introduced the concept. Now what is agile? Normally in the need for agile was that you have to actually deliver it very quickly in cloud. You don't want to, in cloud, if you are old even by a month, somebody else might have already gone ahead and actually delivered much more features, and chances are very high. Since you're running in a subscription mode, by next month, you don't even have that user that you had. He's not renewed with you, but he's actually gone and started using something else. Of course, in enterprise scenarios, it's a little difficult than that, because it's not easy that maybe some content that you have created, it is much more easy to just dump it like that and go. But it is still, that is how, I mean, that's where the whole world is going towards, that everything is so modular that you need to do innovations very quickly. And that's the reason why it becomes very, very important that you have a methodology on how you do it as well. Right? And that is what it is all about, discovering what customers and users really need and delivering faster. So faster is a word, what they need is an important thing. So normally all successful cloud companies are already applying this agile collaboration engineering practices. So you will hear agile methodology, you will hear agile software engineering, you will hear different words, but yeah, different companies have a different way of doing it, but conceptually they come all together in a similar way. The most important aspect is this whole methodology will focus towards a continuous iteration of development and testing in the overall software development lifecycle. Right? The benefits are many. Yeah? Of course, it's already there in the slide, otherwise I would have maybe asked you this. The first important thing is when you are going in small measures, the chances of you being able to understand, or if a mistake has happened, then you already know it early and you can already fix it and reduce defects. That's the reason why it says reduce defects. You can avoid regression. So maybe multiple people are now actually have done their changes. So everybody is doing small module development. So everybody has done changes and they submit their changes. There is a problem. Okay, and something has gone wrong. So that's how, and you avoid those problems. Or some problem which was already, some fixed bugs that was already delivered in some release, something again has got changed there. So when you're doing it in small pieces, chances of regressions are very low. Of course, you deliver faster. Also, overall integration effort is much reduced. In on-premise days, you remember that last few months when you actually had to deliver a product would be the most scariest. And it would be very difficult. Today I only get to hear, okay, today is my release decision meeting, or maybe today is my demo day. That's the reason why I'm very busy. Otherwise, mostly things are not, I mean, they are taken care of, or they are much on the process. It is something that keeps on happening. So you keep getting feedback, you keep fixing. Early feedback we talked about, reduce maintenance load. And overall keep our total cost of operations also under control. So when you already know things are wrong and you can fix it, chances of you having less costs, I mean, you not having much costs is high. So these are the benefits. There are many best practices people follow in these agile methodologies. I don't want to go too deep, and that's the reason why I'm just introducing them to them. Something called pair programming, where of course there are two people. Normally maybe a person who has new knowledge and somebody who has maybe a little more knowledge. They get together and do pair programming. The chances of doing mistakes become much more lesser. Concept of code review. So you have done your coding and you have actually merged it into, and then you also already assign it to somebody else to review. Yeah? So 4I principal concept is there in the process itself, already taken care of. Test-driven development is, of course, you don't write the code first. You first write the test cases. You first write the unit test cases, JUnits are only in Java. But yeah, the test cases, and then only finally you start writing code. Then comes, there could be, refactoring is also something which is consistently done, because you get to know there are challenges, you need to have refactoring possibility. Then test automation strategy, this is something that should be there in place. I will talk a little bit about this. Backlog in Scrum. This is something that I have not talked about in detail, but I want to introduce this yet, still. So Scrum is again part of the agile methodology. It has its own stuff. So while you're doing execution, you normally maybe working. So it's called either Sprint, Tux, and many other different names in different places or different companies. So you work in a specific time unit. Yeah. Some people do it for 1 week. Some people do it for 2 weeks. Some people do it for example, Facebook does it in a daily basis, I think. Right? No, daily basis they do their continuous delivery, but yeah, their sprint cycles are smaller, But even within the organization, you might not necessarily follow the same. Even within our organization, we have different teams which are doing. Of course, in the Scrum, you will what you try to do is you also need to have a way of managing what you want to deliver, right? And that is what is called backlog. And this is something again which will there are multiple different roles in Scrum as well, and very well defined roles. But some companies they they mix and match as well. It doesn't have to be that one person has to have a specific role. Normally there are roles like product owners who will have a very functional oriented role, and they will be the ones who will work with the customer to give you all the requirements, to give you the details of the requirements. If it's a technical product that you're building, then also these are the people who will give you the requirements for getting this made available, or the functional aspects of it, which could then go to deeper technical level as well. So these are the ones who will be responsible for managing your backlogs. Then of course in different companies that happens in different ways. These same product owners might work with other different people. Some places they call it chief product owner, some places they call product manager, some places they call something else, who will actually talk to the real customer to get the details and other stuff. And so I'll not go into that, we get into too many things. Then of course there is another best practice called continuous integration, which we will talk about. Okay. Now I want to introduce this concept before we go on to the other stuff. So DevOps. Now DevOps is not what we do, it is what we practice. So it is not one person doing something, but it is something we collectively put together, teams or enlarged or extended teams are doing. So DevOps is a practice of operations. So previously there used to be very specific operations teams. Previously now there are maybe still necessity that there are certain people who are purely operations, but they are involved in the overall process. So that's what is changing. That's the reason why they club this word development and operations. So practice of operations and development engineers participating together in the entire service life cycle that reside through the development process to production support in a rapid iterative process. Yeah? So many times these operation people are also involved to discuss about data segregation that we talked about, or rather multi-tenancy, and how you do data segregation with multi-tenancy, so that they know that this doesn't become a challenge when finally it is deployed, because they are the ones who are actually monitoring consistently what's going on in your overall product development. Yeah? So how do we do DevOps? Yeah, so the DevOps cycle normally is that you plan. So this again comes this also comes on in the cycle where the developer and customer is involved as well. So when you are doing planning, that is the only phase where your customer /PO/ whatever will be also available for you to really give you what the backlog of content is that you need to really do, which is the planning phase. Then you will finally do implementation, so code, and then finally build that code and test it, release it, then deploy, then operate and monitor. So you are not only deploying it, but also consistently checking if things are failing or not failing, what's going on, and also monitoring if how much, many times maybe usage is also something which is monitored, that how many users are using this application, what's the load coming in, and then how is it working, is scalability working fine, and all those things also people check. So there are multiple SLAs that we give as either a SaaS provider or a cloud provider, and we need to manage and maintain that. And that is normally the DevOps or operation person who will take care of looking into this deeper. Yeah. So that's why it's a cycle, or rather infinite cycle, if you see. So how is it being done? There, of course, there is the concept of self-service configuration, and hence automated provisioning. So you have said that, okay, now I want this many units of CPU, or I need so many as a customer, end customer. So this is something which has to be made available by operations to you, that okay, this is what is required by this person to run these applications in an area, right? And then automated provisioning is also another thing which will be very important, which means I do not want some manual work to really happen once I have asked for a tenant in this particular application. And I want to make sure that this whole onboarding provisioning which is happening, that means I am getting my system, I am getting my CPU, I am getting my database, and all that is also possibly happening automatically. Then continuous build, continuous integration, continuous delivery, automated release management, incremental testing. These are all different concepts which will be there in this overall cycle. Why we do it? Again, similar, faster and less expensive deployments, reusable deployment procedure, faster feedback, overall lower cost of product development. So so the DevOps is mostly the portion where you are directly actually, the deployment goes into finally to the customer. Okay. While in the previous case, it is more internal. The agile methodology that we talked about, that's more internal. The Scrum and that we talked about is more internal. Where how you are developing. And okay, now coming back to, I want to introduce this first, but I was kind of confused that where should this be really placed, because this merges these concepts also again together. So this is basically certain principles that need to be kept in mind when you are coming up with this whole process of how do you want to set up the DevOps and the agile methodology for delivering this SaaS application, or even in the past units that you really want to deliver to your end customer. So application and end user focus. So the overall team itself has to have a focus on making the application run well and it's impact to the end. So the overall team has to understand this whole cycle of how this is getting delivered, what is happening, and so that they understand the things cannot break and how you really make all this happen. There is very high importance of collaboration. That's the reason why the word itself is DevOps. That means you need to work very closely with operations. You need to also work with multiple different stakeholders. Silos will not work in this way. So these principles become very important when you are actually in the execution phase. Performance orientation. Of course, everything has a specific speed in which you want to do. One is, of course, the delivery speed. The other is also maybe how you measure the performances when you're doing you're delivering the product as well, right? So both cases. And then development speed. Okay, this one is more related to development speed. That means how fast you can really go to the market, deploy new software every day multiple times. And if you deliver fast, maybe also you fail fast. Chances are you get feedback fast and you can reiterate and make sure things are fixed. And you would have many times noticed Facebook releases certain feature. Okay, I am taking example of Facebook is because that's where it's very obvious that it releases certain feature in the morning, you saw it, in the afternoon you don't see it. Yeah, so and then people would have tested. They would have tested, meaning they would have used that feature and then some feedback would have gone in. And by afternoon maybe you don't see it because of whatever reason. There is some reason because of which it has not come. Maybe again another few days later you didn't see it. And that time you maybe see it longer. Right? It's more like going faster, failing faster, and then again recovering and coming back. Service orientation, everything is a service from application components to infrastructure. So basically you need to make sure that everything that you are building in design as well as while you are doing all activities, everything is a service that you are really trying to make available for all. And that's why this also becomes an important aspect in the execution process. Automation, you need to make sure that everything, every single level of or line of code is actually automated. You have a way for it to, for you to get a result of what is the expectation out of it. So it's not only functional, it could be also code wise something is wrong and it should be able to give you a feedback that things are not working. Right? Monitor everything. This is a little more high level or not necessarily very specific to a single line of code, but monitoring expands to many different ways. Monitoring has a specific slide for which I'll talk about it there. Now, I'll talk about few of the concepts that we have introduced. So, first comes continuous integration, and then we talk about continuous delivery. CI/CD is something that you commonly hear from a lot of people, and many times it is also pretty confusing, and you sometimes get okay, which part of this is the CI and which part of this is the CD. So I've tried to give as much clarity as possible. So continuous integration is the procedure of automating the development and testing code. It encourages, so it is the piece where you are consistently, you have written a piece of code, you know that okay, this is something that will work, or whatever that one task of that backlog was, you have already completed that, or maybe one user story you have completed, and you want to now check it. So you're responsible for that one user story, you want to check in that code. So this is that scenario where you will be able to, so you have made sure that you have automated and written some unit test cases for this scenario as well. And you check it. There might be some additional unit tests from other scenarios also coming in, including other code also coming in. So once this test run, you will get to understand if it is really working proper. And you can consistently do this. For example, you are submitting code, you are checking in a code, your team member can also check in the code that time, and this monitor will happen. You should be either if there is problem, then the automated test cases will fail. Otherwise, you should be able to get a feedback or things should run smoothly. So why it is important that as a developers to share their development code, unit testing by merging their modification into mutual version to control the source on completion of them smaller tasks. So you don't have to wait till that release date to get merging of each of these scenarios to happen, because then it becomes a Herculean task to actually integrate them and finally get them tested as well, and then everything becomes manual. Here you run automators, so you know that okay, if there is a problem, I fix it. That's it. So Jenkins is the most common to use automation tool, but need not be that this is the only one. So overall, you will input your test cases and push it into a development branch. There will be a main branch where all this information will go in, and in this branch, the integration tests, acceptances, security, performance, promote, release, all this can also run. But the singular piece of what you are delivering is more related to the continuous integration. And why is it important if the build fails? So that you can take actions. You can understand exactly which iteration the problematic code is from. So if you are not checking in early, the chances of you being able to figure out that this is the portion where things are failing becomes more difficult, or rather too many issues come into it. So it's better that we keep on continuously integrating. Helps to obtain faster results and faster feedback. So feedback could be from the view of code review. Your peer would have already done the review and also given you information once this is checked. Then the other concept, and since they are related, that's the reason why it's important to talk about this early. So continuous delivery picks up where continuous integration ends. Yeah? CD automates the delivery of applications to selected infrastructure environment. So even in the previous screen, this was already made obvious that look at the picture, there we already said it moves till the release. Right? But the conceptually it means that whatever you are working, let's assume we say 2 weeks is your sprint in which you have to deliver and end working code for a specific scenario. Yeah? And that's the reason why it is small builds. So what you do is, in that short sprint, whatever you have delivered, that should be in a state where if there is a need, it can actually be delivered as is to the customer and they should be able to use it. That's the idea of continuous delivery. So why delivery word is important here is it is actually an unit which is can be actually delivered to the customer and be used. There are scenarios which this might not happen. That's why we also mentioned that this does not mean the code of project is 100% complete, but the feature sets that are available are vetted, tested, debugged, and ready to deploy. Although you may not deploy it at that moment. So this option is again to the organization or even to that small team who decides how to really want to run it. Maybe the team runs it one way, then the organization has a setup. So based on how what principles your organization will follow, based on that your continuous delivery will happen. Yeah, but the idea is that you have to keep the code in such a way that if there is a need to deliver, if there is a need for this to be deployed actually for customer to use successfully, they can do it. Many cases, there are also scenarios like we have this concept called feature flag. So you could also say that this feature is not complete, but there are units that are written which is complete. But overall feature is still not complete, which means technically I don't want my customer to see it or use it. So you can use this, or you can use this concept of feature flag to make sure that you don't enable that for a specific customer, or you want it for a specific customer. You can maybe then enable it for a specific customer, and they can only see it while others cannot see it.
Kind of a kill switch.
Yeah. So maybe it's called in different names in all different places. But yeah, the idea is that this is something which is very specific and also maybe not completed, and this is the reason why I don't want to. But it's a deployable unit, which means it has gone through the version control, build and unit test, automated acceptance test, user acceptance test. User acceptance test in many places is still not purely automated. Many cases there is still some QA which is sitting there doing those tests. That's fine, but this is the one which is more part of the overall process in the system that is undergoing. And then finally, approval. There are many different gates. A lot of people put based on your company. There might be a release decision meeting gate. There might be a design gate. There might be many different gates and all this, which is not a problem. That's a program part. That's another aspect which I have not talked about. But it's about managing how do you deliver these pieces. Okay, just wanted to introduce that there are multiple different tools that can be used. These are not, in fact, the only tools. There are many more as well in the market. And every company decides on what they want to use based on maybe the kind of DevOps people or the kind of developers that they have available based on their knowledge, or they are asked to, or what kind of tool that you are really writing. So Eclipse definitely commonly used, GitHub, JUnit, Maven, 45, Selenium, Docker.
These are the repositories, right? GitHub, the free.
Yeah.
This is the free. What you say? Visual Studio kind of framework, and this is source control.
Yes. So
how-
GitHub is a source control.
So how it is related to continuous delivery?
So you have to see in this case where your delivery team is writing the code, somewhere you have to deliver it, right? From a particular repository, then all your automation tests should get triggered, or build should happen. Then automation tests should get triggered on that particular unit that you have already delivered. So it has to go into a repository where this will get triggered, right? That is where GitHub will be used. Right? Okay. Now another, we talked about it, but maybe a little more detail about test automation. So there could be multiple different levels of automation that you do for testing, starting from unit testing, which is one small unit that you have delivered. You make sure that you are writing unit test cases for it. And in Java scenario, they are called JUnits, .NET and unit. And overall, if you want to test a feature, which is front-end kind of a feature, then normally you will go for something like a Selenium. Yeah, and of course there could be other tests which also for example, there could be exploratory tests, which you want to look at, not necessarily the general scenarios, but different other scenarios which are not very obviously built into the functionality. You want to look at maybe scenarios which are different from the functionality. So these are the different kind of testing that you can also plan for. Little more details on them. Unit tests are normally used for the specific key feature in the agile development scenario. Unit tests can be written to define the functionality before the code is written. So normally it is said that first you write, so SDD for example, you do your test driven development, so TDD. You do your test cases first and then you do your development. As the development progresses, unit cases would also evolve. Of course, the first one might not necessarily be the best one, but then slowly it will also evolve. Helps to handle changes better as the developer can identify issues during development, and it's much easier, less expensive to fix or at this stage. So reason again, faster failure, faster delivery. Security testing, okay, this is a very specific or specialized testing. Some cases can be automated, some cases cannot be. In cases like penetration test, vulnerability test, these are some cases where it can be automated. The idea is to ensure that data and application security, where we were talking about a lot of tenants, databases and stuff, that is something that is taken care of. Normally these kind of security reviews can also be done by tools like code scanners, Spotify, and then these tools can also help in, once you have done some solution, they can also give you a report which would mostly used for maybe management level or release decision meeting to say that, okay, how are we really doing in such scenarios? Is there a problem? Right. In different phases of the life cycle. Regression testing with frequent releases. So mostly regression testing is again for the scenarios. This is also something that you can automate, and it is mostly for the scenarios where you don't want to look at any issue which was there before is again reoccurring.
So regression can be automated or it has to be manual? It can be automated. It's Selenium.
Selenium is for UI testing. If it's front-end, then front-end regression scenario, then Selenium. Otherwise, otherwise the same thing. You will have to use JMeter.
Okay.
This is again a different concept, which is called continuous monitoring. You normally, so there are multiple levels. One monitoring could be at the level where you are only trying to look at systems and what's going on in the systems or different tenants. So there you could look at monitoring availability. For example, has the system gone down? Something has happened, maybe some crash has happened or whatever, has it gone? Is that the challenge? That you would look at availability monitoring. Sorry. Then maybe in cases where you believe there is too much data overload, you will also look at performance monitoring. Ensure KPIs are met at system level completely. Yeah. So the other is every cloud provider has to give an SLA to the end customer. So that's one of the bigger reasons why a lot of monitoring will be required to make sure that those SLAs are met. And there will, and for each of these SLAs will have a certain KPI. You cannot pass that particular KPI. For example, some companies might say that I will be available 99.9%. So you need to make sure that that is something that you are delivering. Otherwise, you will get sued, or you will have to somehow pay back to the customer as well. It could be at the system level, component level, and the application level. So that's why I'm saying this is very generic. It could be in the highest level, or also the application level scenario. Monitor third-party applications and integrations. There could be scenarios where you are working with a lot of third parties, and and you are responsible for it, then you will also need to make sure that these are not the ones which are causing problems. And then monitor essential service scenarios, monitor service quality and health, collect and analyze your view. So of course you do monitor all of these aspects, but then finally you need to also make sure that you collect this data, have a reporting available, and finally use that feedback to actually change things and put it back into your system. That's where we were saying operate and measure. So you measure, you monitor, and you now have decided, okay, there are certain things which are not right, and then you feed it back to the system. It goes into planning again. That's the reason why we say dev and ops need to be together. So if the ops person is able to give this feedback back into the system, then only the dev guy is able to really take care of that and fix it, and then give you a better scenario. So if things are failing here, availability is a problem, scalability is a problem, or some other issue, some quality issue, some health issue is there, then there's a challenge. There's another kind of monitoring, very specific to SaaS. It's a feature.
But ops is majorly for the what do you say, deployments where the system in where the deployment happens. So what is the role of a developer there? Like either system goes down or the server crashes or so what the dev
So depends on what reason it has crashed.
so that is then during regression, your performance testing, all those stuff
Yes.
are already done, right? So ops is totally different where the deploy builds are failing. So
So yeah.
So that's the mindset we want to come out of. Saying developer's role is different from an operations person.
but we really don't keep into the deployment where it is
Yeah, we
running
do.
on
That is
the-
because we have not transitioned yet. For example, there is a SaaS software, and then you just want to create something very small, and then this is an app, right? And you have to deploy all of that. Just for one single app that you are deploying on a particular SaaS software, you do not want to establish another operations model. So then what happens, the developer knows what exactly is required and they take care of the operations. And we talked about microservices. I think we will talk about it in future, but the moment microservices become too common, these microservices will have to be managed by somebody who's created it. They know it best. Right? So
but as per currently as we know, ops does the deployment part
Yeah.
where we don't have to go the deployment.
but now that has
Yes.
to change.
So
yeah.
maybe you don't have to bother when as the deployment has happened, but somebody in the system, it might not come back to the developer as is that way, but somebody in the system has to look at any feedback that is coming in, and if it has an implication finally to a developer unit that has been delivered, it has to come back as a feedback to the unit, to the developer itself. So
Because developer testing all goes at a part of performance testing,
Yes.
regression testing, your security threats, all those are
So
covered.
many
then
times
it goes to-
testing will not also necessarily give you all the problems, right? And that is where monitoring becomes important and feedback channel becomes important.
I think she also has
Maybe I can give you an example. For example, you delivered a report feature to production.
Okay.
You would have a data set, let's say the performance and all said fine, and you deployed it. Now, you could have a real use case that when the customer is trying to extract the report, it actually shows an issue in performance in the productive environment because probably the data set is not really matching to the performance sets that the data set that you used in your unit test and all that, right? So at that point, monitoring would come back and say, look, the customer has not complained, but I do see a high CPU usage happening in this particular tenant during this time of the day. And then they figure out, okay, this is the application call that has come. And at that point, the DevOps personnel will call back or raise a ticket saying that I see an issue, your customer might complain. And that becomes a feedback back to developers saying that this feature caused it. Now please go back, do some more performance testing and fix this issue. And you might then have to look at your data set and try to match it. That could be the reason why it comes.
Yeah, so in many cases, like we can't test all the options in that software, right? There can be a part like how user use it and how we use it because we know the software itself. The user doesn't know much maybe, so they will be testing in according to their, and again the environment will be different for you and for the user. If you talk about the network part, maybe like we have seen multiple times that if it's a software from different browser, it reacts in different way. Like in Firefox or Chrome will be based on Java. So they will be like if there is any certificate issues, that catches up. But the Firefox doesn't catch up the certificate part. So it again depends on different browser environment and the network structure. Maybe those things we can't test it in our own environment maybe.
But
I
in
think from
on-premise
product
scenario, I
perspective-
would have agreed with you.
But I think product perspective also you will normally give your product specification, right? In which browsers you would support
Yes.
and all those things.
So
Versions of the
in on-premise
browsers.
world, I would have agreed with you that okay, customer has a different landscape. I don't know that landscape, so I can do whatever.
Okay.
This is not the case in cloud because you are giving the landscape to the customer. Right? So as a SaaS application developer, it's your responsibility to decide if it's a browser-oriented front end. You will have to take care that it works in all products.
And you have to test against one.
That is not necessarily the feedback that will come from DevOps.
Okay.
Okay, that's a different thing. That's a feature bug and not a feature problem. Normally will come back from the customer if you have not taken care of it. These are scenarios that you have to take.
That kind of thing probably should be taken care at the test strategy
Yes,
level
yes.
itself.
Even browser
Correct, this is a
compatibility
different
and all
scenario.
needs to do in the testing level only.
Yeah. So this is a totally different thing. But this thing, like she explained, will be one which will really relate it to what you are saying. So it is not required that the customer has to complain at the end of it. It's important for us to really keep cleaning up. If we have created some mess, let's just clean it up. And if there is some guy who is actually able to really see it, he doesn't have to really sit and monitor all the time. This will create reports anyway for him. And it is also possible to find out anomalies and report them by the machine doing it itself. This is not a single person who's sitting there already doing it. Right? But the importance is the execution of how you do it is very important, that this feedback loop is there. So your company, when it's doing cloud development, should make sure that this kind of feedback loop is possible. There should be a process where this feedback loop should be possible. It need not always come to the developer. It might come back to maybe the architect. Maybe it breaks down into such a pace that you don't get to know that this has come really from that side. Also,
We can make it out from the cloud portal itself, right? Wherever it is deployed from the, we will be having a pace to have the details, or we need to have some other software to monitor it.
yeah. So normally it will be, if you are an admin who is actually, who has
We
the
get to see this thing.
yes, so who has the access to actually monitor, because this will be normally the guy who has higher access levels to many customer tenants, right? And he is of course not from a data privacy point of view, but this person is more responsible for that option. Developer cannot sit and have a look in and monitor all the time, or even the report also he cannot sit and have a look. So that's the reason why there's a difference. So the ops guy will work with the dev guy to make sure that this is also taken care of. Right? Yeah. You want to say something?
Just to add that developer can enable these monitoring, and so we can identify what are the things which we want to monitor and provide this to the DevOps personnel who is actually monitoring, so that they can monitor, and if there is anything which he detects, he can get back to the team saying, yeah, this service is not working as intended, so can you look into it. So development from our side, we can say what are the essential services which needs to be monitored and how it can be monitored. So we can enable them.
In a SaaS scenario, it is also sometimes, I mean, I'm going a little beyond this, is beyond that monitoring. There's also a scenario where you do usage monitoring, for example, and normally this is a very product owner / product management scenario where you try to see if this application is really getting used. If this is a scenario, is this really getting used, but I'm wasting my time here? Maybe I should do something else, or either I should have a different feature that should really come. That could also be one other reason why people really look at if this product is getting used or not. Usage monitoring is what it is called, or maybe you look at for different. I mean, how much data flow is there? For example, if too many people are accessing, then maybe there is something else that I need to take. And maybe failure has not happened, but what should I do so that I can manage this kind of usage? All such kind of things can also happen. Okay. So about execution, kind of, really done, and wanted to really now move into the space. I know this is a very verbose slide, that's okay, but more important is that we want to give you a little bit of introduction, because when we met previously also, we understood that there is a need for people to know, okay, what are the things that should I learn? One is the concept, which we are talking here about, but then what are the details? For example, what coding language should I learn so that I can really manage different things in cloud. Now this is not a laundry list, which means these are very specific things that we have talked, but maybe the most generic ones that are commonly used. So in SaaS, of course, there could be a client side and then a server side coding that you are doing. And yes, in normal cases, client side maybe if it's very specific, you might only respect to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But there could be other scenarios where you might be using a framework to actually build your UI, and that could be some have been mentioned here, but there could be many more. Server side, definitely there are some popular ones which are available, and PHP, Python, Node.js, and Ruby, these are the ones which are popularly used. And in cases if you use Node.js, you only need to learn one programming language, that is JavaScript, and you can both use it for client and server side. Some examples, Ruby has been used for Airbnb to start on GitHub, Python for Google use Python, just examples. So very high level, just an introduction that okay, these are few things that you can look at, search for if you are getting started or moving from on-premise to cloud and you have not done it before, then maybe these are few things that you want to start looking at.
I mean, it looks like we're pretty much a UI developer's profile. It doesn't match my .NET developer or any Java developer profile.
It depends
So
on
where do I sit here? Like, it looks like pretty much of any UI developer that we are having in our office. So it doesn't match my profile massively.
What is your profile?
I'm a .NET developer, so I can write API methods, I can pull from database, but HTML, CSS, PHP, all these are my UI developers, this thing profile match.
Yes.
So that is where I stand here. Where do I stand here? Like, how do I need to learn these things or what?
Do you want to be a holistic developer or do you want to stick yourself to the server side kind of development?
So you are talking about the server side development where we have only mentioned few of them. So .NET can be used now also in an Azure scenario. Right? You can continue doing development in the server side.
Our team takes a UI developer, they pretty much know everything out of this.
Yeah, so in cloud world, this differentiation will also go away very soon. So we now have this concept of full stack developer. They do development from top to bottom, which means they do client, they do server also.
No, and back in 2006-07 when I
so
started.
Going to 2020, on 2020 is just there. So 2025, you can say that one is maybe none of these will also be important then. So .NET is very old.
No, when I started working, we used to do the client side. We used to pull the controls that we used to sit nicely. Okay. But now this
No, but you used to use the controls because you had a UI framework, right? So with that IDE, you can actually say, okay, what happens behind that you don't know. Then you're not bothered. You say, I just want this. This is how my UI should look, and you use those.
I'm fine with that. If
now,
Basically, just to add here, on cloud itself, you want these clients to be really lightweight, and you want to bring in a framework at the background which will make the client easier. So, and also, as we said, that it needs to be stateless as well. And client usually will only be maintaining the session related data and it will be feeding into the session. So, at that layer, we don't want any framework or additional libraries to render the
So loading time of the library itself can cause problems to the
So here HTML directly can talk to the database. With the PHP files and all those, they can directly talk to the database.
No, HTML is JavaScript to talk to.
It is still the UI elements.
This is a
UI element. So you have your
HTML, CSS, JavaScript, UI element. Frameworks are jQuery, Bootstrap that I've mentioned, but like I said, there are many more.
No, which can talk to the database and pull out the data and all those things. So this is just for the UI thing, or it can do everything.
So JavaScript is the one which will talk to scenarios like if you have code in the server side, which is neither Node.js or you've written in Ruby or Python. then that is what will be
Or even
posted.
.NET.
Even .NET.
So someone
Even
having
.NET, Java.
UI profile will be better suited with
No,
my
no,
application.
no.
This is server side, maybe I'm not bold, maybe that's
So
why.
PHP, the UI developers.
No, there is no
PHP.
Java there, so you can
So
say
I've not
Java,
mentioned Java.
.NET, Ruby on Rails.
Yeah,
Any
yeah.
of these can be used for server-side programming.
I have
or
not
server-side.
mentioned Java, but Java
Yeah.
can also be used.
Yeah.
.NET can also be used. And
It's for
Azure,
cloud-based Java.
Azure.NET is only used, right?
Yeah, I mean, we do Azure programming use .NET. We even directly deploy it using that IDE only. That's why I wanted to understand why it looked like our UI developer's profile.
No.
No. It's your full stack developer.
Both UI and the server side.
Yeah, but conceptually what you are talking about, it is important that yes, I think this is not new news. This is something I've seen before also. So whoever is if new technologies are coming in, it's always best to make sure that we have a fair understanding about it. And it doesn't have to. And it doesn't have to be necessarily that one does only this, the other does something else. Okay, yeah. So that's the idea. That slowly and steadily make sure that developers are moving to be able to do full stack development. The other is they have more sort of skills that they are ramping up into. That is it. The last slide, and there is one more slide. Why is it showing like this? But okay, I'll fix it and maybe hopefully. So there are some roles that we know in the industry which have been created, or rather very commonly available. So there are certain job families and there are certain job roles and titles which are available in the industry. Very commonly known but the problem is there is always a confusion. Okay, what role should I really focus myself on? Like for example, you are saying UI developer. So there is another one which is UI UX architect, or it could be developer also. I'm not saying it has to be architect only. So there are many roles that are available today. If you are already looking for a change and moving into the cloud world, then you can really explore these kind of roles. Some of them are already available in futureskills.com itself. Quite a bit of details has been given there, and please do have a look. This is a lot of information. We need some time to process. If there is some,
I would like to focus is like for my profile, cloud native application developer. What exactly? Or development engineer. What those things would be?
yeah. So development engineer again is a very generic term. Could be used for any kind of languages that they are doing. It could be UI side as well, but mostly will be maybe server side. And it could be for SaaS applications. It could be actually for writing PaaS application. So you are writing microservices for PaaS. Then also you could be a development engineer. It doesn't have to be always SaaS. That means there is no application required to actually only be a developer as well. Now, in many scenarios, what we have realized is when it is not purely SaaS, but people who are only writing application, but they don't worry about the PaaS or the ideas. They mostly do not like to be called as development engineer. They would prefer themselves to be more like application developer. And cloud native application developer mostly comes cases where you have Cloud Foundry you're doing development for such scenarios. You are writing native applications. That is when you will call yourself a native application developer. So otherwise, you could use a very generic term called development.
What's the difference between app development and engineering?
Yeah, so this is a difference that we didn't know existed, but looks like there are, not looks like, so there are companies who do not, who are maybe only doing the application development part, so it's not even SaaS. They're only doing application development using a PaaS, which is available by any cloud provider. And of course, EIS. Let's assume that you use AWS, some mobile hub, okay? And you want to build a mobile application. So the guy who is developing the application, he doesn't bother about the other concepts or other, not concepts, but at least the other layers that he has to work with. he understands only the API, and he just calls those APIs and makes his work happen. Normally these guys don't want to bother with, or they don't like to call themselves engineers, but they would like to call themselves application developers. So that's the differentiation that we found in the market. And there was a small exercise some of us had done with the NASSCOM itself. So that's when we realized that this is the differentiation that's available. Because we, most of us are in a platform level, and that's the reason why we thought that engineer is a word which should encompass everybody, but it looks like that's not the case. They have different requirements, they have different activities. That's the reason why it's differentiated. Yeah, it's done. I just wanted to make sure that, I don't know what it's coming with. So, I really wanted to thank all the mentors who have also supported in actually getting this cloud computing session delivered as well. So that's why I wanted to tell, and Archana, we want your help, that we have quite a bit of mentors who are available here. Yeah, quickly. Rashmi, all of you have met. Alima, you have met. Nishil. Sapna. Suki. Aarti. Anyone else? Did I miss something? Shilakshmi. Yeah. So we want to check if any of them are your mentors, because they are dying to actually meet them. And we want to handle that. And maybe Archana, you can say something.
Definitely. But before even I step into that zone, I wanted to kind of really thank the gurus.
Okay, thank you. So, I was like, okay, thank you so much, gurus, because, and this is on behalf of SAP, I hope you guys are liking all these interactions. There are mentors around you guys. If they are they happen to be your mentors, it's a good interaction. It's a good face-to-face conversation with them. If they're not, it's still a good idea to have a conversation with them and try to understand, how they can help you. But I think what I generally believe is it's a two-way traffic. It's like they learn as much as you learn from them. So make it, whenever there is an opportunity, make it as interactive as possible. And gurus, I know that it's not your daily job. It's definitely going extra mile and sharing. In my mind, it's like giving back to the society, giving back to the community. And thank you so much for doing all the hard work and spreading your knowledge all over. Thank you so much. Thank you. I know there's lots of SAP lives. Thank you so much.
There's also a small token of appreciation from NASSCOM for our untiring gurus. Paramita and Sapna started with an amazing sense of humor, and I'm sure it kind of flowed through throughout the session. Thank you so much. So just before Sapna, you step into that, we've got all our mentors here, we've got the gurus here. What's missing is the mentees. And clearly the gurus and the mentors are everybody standing, and the mentees are the ones who are sitting. Okay, there's a mentor who just like I'm not a one. So ladies, what I'm trying to say is that we need to really up our energy. We really, when you've embarked on this 1-year journey to say that I'm going to learn something new, I'm going to build awareness on this particular technology, and you've got some amazing set of folks over here to help you, to handhold you, and take you through that, right? So it's very important for all of you to onboard onto Move My Cheese. Some of you would have received that invite from Move My Cheese. Please use that, onboard to it. And for those who've not received it yet, which means you're in queue, we should probably look at the people who have not onboarded, push them, get them to do it, and then you get on next, right? So a couple of dates that you need to keep on your mind is the 29th of March, this month, when we're going to actually do mass onboarding for the entire set of mentees who've not onboarded yet. Yeah, I just also wanted to give you a very important notification out here. After the 29th, we give you 5 days of time. If you don't still activate your accounts, do your calling, schedule your calls, etc. with your mentor, we move you out and we bring a fresh set of mentees for the mentors. Yeah, because I think we've been idle on this for about 2 months, and it's really, we've got a whole set of other technologists who are like really wanting to get there, and make use of the mentors and learn from the mentors and engage with the mentors. Yeah. On that note, looking forward to having you all for the next Gurukul session. We would be sending you feedback forms. Please do fill in those feedback forms and send it back to us. Yeah, and happy lunch. So
and this is not for the feedback, this is all for the questions. that you answered.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing you all next time.
Most